Hi, everyone. I'm back. That was not too long. Thank you for joining us here at Spark. I'm excited to kick off our first day of Spark content with a fireside chat with Bob. Bob and I are going to chat about what it truly means to be customer obsessed and the actions we can all take to ensure that our customers are at the center of all of our decisions. It's not an accident that we're kicking off Spark 2021 with Bob, who has a storied career as the VP of Marketing at Gap and American Eagle. Bob is now the Chief Brand Strategist for Gail Communications, a top-tier agency in New York City. Bob, welcome to Spark 2021. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Matt. It's exciting to be here. And I was going to start with my tongue out just to kind of let it hang just for some humor. But anyway, I'll get right to it. So anyway, thanks for everyone for letting me be part of this. And my background, it's interesting. I come from a very small town outside of Pittsburgh called Monaca. It's in Beaver County. And I've had this great opportunity having a non-linear kind of career. So when I look back at what I've done over my timeline, I've been a merchant for a period of time. I've been a head of merchandising strategy, and I've also been a marketer for the last 10 years. And it's kind of interesting because, it really has given me perspective on something that really grounds this entire conversation we're going to have over the course of the next 30 minutes. And I'm excited to be here. So.
Awesome, Bob. Let's get personal for a second. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so it was Monaca in Beaver County. So again, it's a very, very small town. In my high school, we had 79 total students. So when I mentioned that to people that had like 600 to 1,000, it's almost a laughable statistic. So anyway, it's just something that kind of is a little fun fact about me. And it's interesting. I now reside in New York City, just outside the city of Montclair, New Jersey. And that's where I'm coming live with you guys today.
Awesome. Bob, growing up, I always thought I would be in sales. I always had sales jobs around the neighborhood. How about for you? Did you always think that you would be a marketeer? Is this something that you thought would be your professional calling?
Yeah, I guess, when you think about that, the one thing that I remember my mother always dragging me out of stores, dragging me out of the mall or the grocery store. And I would always sit there and watch the people. I was fascinated by it, like what aisles they were going into, what they were putting into their shopping carts, or shopping bags they were carrying through the mall. So I guess maybe I didn't know definitively, but I think that was probably an early stage that the seed had been planted for me.
All right, before we get in some hard-hitting content, you worked at some super legit companies. I imagine whether it be at Gap, American Eagle, you probably had some either wild photo shoots, interesting engagements with celebs, some wild collaborations. Do you have any great stories that you can share with us to kick off today?
Sure. I'll hit you with the two. I'll keep it brief. So it's interesting. We had this initiative we were working on at American Eagle, and it was when virality was viral, right? It was just starting in the early stages. And at the time in the marketplace, skinny jeans were emerging. And we were having this pun because every meeting we would sit in with the merchants, it was like, well, everything keeps getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. We were like, wow, we should do like a stunt with spray on jeans. So we put together a very well-crafted fake campaign, put it on our website. You could literally try to purchase the spray cans of the jeans, and then it had a URL for an email modal that popped up, and we got that marketability. And it literally went viral and almost crashed the website. And 48 hours later, we were literally on the Today Show. And the kind of funny thing about that is I was 3 months into the job, and my chief marketing officer was in Europe. So I had to go on the Today Show, and I literally was so nervous, I almost collapsed. So that was one.
I love it.
Yeah, and it was fun.
What was the second?
The second was this wild idea we had, and I love wild ideas, right? Where, every year, Christmas, when you're kind of in retail, it's about red, white, and green, like ho, 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 and it's very traditional Hallmark. So we were really trying to think how we could be disruptive. And we literally came up with a campaign that was called High Desert Holiday, where we literally shot in Arizona, in Sedona. It was 95 degrees, and our models were literally almost passing out. We had misting tents, and we literally hired a company and made it snow in Arizona, used CGI, et cetera, a variety of other things. And people were like, oh my God, that's Red Rocks. How did you make it snow there? It was crazy. So it was just kind of fun to kind of do something that was unbelievable like that.
I love it. I wish we all had budgets that afforded us the opportunity to make it snow in Arizona. Let's jump in. So, Bob, customer obsession. What does it mean to be customer obsessed is the session description here. And so for you in particular, why is this such an important topic?
Well, it's interesting as I was talking earlier about the nonlinear career. When I was a merchant, and then I did that about a third of my career, and then I was the head of merchandising strategy, and then literally moved into brand marketing. And it's interesting, the one connecting point that kind of went end to end around the whole entire process was really the customer. That is how you were successful in your job. So when you're buying a line or creating an assortment, you're literally building it for your end consumer who's coming into your store and purchasing it. And when you're creating marketing messaging to actually talk to that consumer, it's really for them to get them to kind of engage and convert. And as a brand marketer, it's really kind of focusing on who that audience is and talking to them effectively and a way they want to be spoken to and the channels that they basically are coming to your brand experience. So that to me is the one kind of thing that I think is the kind of overarching story that goes across all those touch points. It's been at the center for me every step of the way. And I think for this graphic that we have here on the page, which I think is great from an organizational perspective, it's really putting the customer right smack dab in the center. And as you look at this Venn diagram, and yeah, they're dirty, et cetera, these are some cool colors, but as you kind of work your way around it, and I'm going to kind of scorecard what are things that are super important. And the first is really customer focused leadership. Like, it will not happen if the leadership team is not bought into it and really cascading it downward. But at the opposite end of the spectrum, you really got to empower the front line, because they're the ones that are brand ambassadors. They're having the conversations with the consumer daily, and they have to be empowered to be able to do their job. There's nothing worse than when there's a scripted response to a customer that has an escalated issue and it doesn't really hit the mark at all and it falls flat. So that's something that's paramount to me. And then really metrics that matter. And depending on the industry that you're in, there's so many different metrics you can look at. There's net promoter score, basically, which scorecards basically your customers' willingness to recommend your brand and products. And that's something that you measure over time, how it's tracking upward, downward, et cetera. And then there's other brand tracking tools that you could use as well, customer surveys, and even having conversations with your customers one-on-one, which is a great experience as well. And I think all of this is super important. And the one thing I kind of want to touch on, I'm not going to go through literally every point on the screen, but designing the experience. The biggest thing that's happened over the course of the last 2 years is DTC, or direct to consumer, has exploded. Like, it's grown overnight. And the ability for brands to get backing, put up a website, find a fulfillment center, and start shipping products daily, it's relatively easy, right? There's a low barrier to entry, but few brands are actually taking that extra added step to say, what is my customer experience? What is that journey? And how do I create that best in class for them to really make sure that when they come and visit my digital or my digital and physical properties, what is that experience for them? And can it be the best that it can be? So
I love it, Bob. Before we move on to the next point, I want to challenge
sure.
our friends and colleagues. At Spark 2020, when we were talking about customer obsession, it's a topic we'll talk about always. I asked the audience, show of hands, if you have actually engaged with one of your renters in the last 60 or 90 days, meaning they actually responded to an inquiry, actually were there, and less than 15% of our audience raised their hand. So the point I'd love to make here is, when you talk about customer-focused leadership, I think it all starts with us also. Are we truly understanding what our customers' requirements are? So in that vein, one of the things that we at Apartment focus on is how we ensure that our customer is built into every decision we make. And because we're a two-sided marketplace, we have two customers in both renters and our partner communities, many of whom are on with us today. So the question we are always wrestling with is, how do you build a customer-obsessed culture throughout the company?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And Lydia, I think you flipped the organization upside down, which is what this next visual kind of demonstrates. So just kind of like walking through this, as you look at the left-hand side, the traditional organization, right? Top management. Those are the CEOs and the senior executives. And basically they're setting and basically initiating the strategies for the entire organization at scale. And then you have the middle management below that literally those kind of strategies are being cascaded downward. And then, as we spoke about previously, the frontline people that are the ones that literally are servicing the customer daily, they are literally the face of the brand, and the ones that are talking, they're servicing, they're kind of assessing and understanding what the wants, needs, and preferences are. But they also have to troubleshoot and be able to figure out, because every customer is different, what they need. And then again, in this particular example, the customer is at the very, very bottom of this chart. Now, in the radically flipped upside down organization, it literally inverts that, and it puts the consumer at the very top, and then the frontline people are next. So when you look at this, Liddy, the CEO of the company, is in service to the customer. And it's a really different philosophy. It really gets the organization wired in thinking how critically important it is to really be laser focused on that from an objective standpoint. And again, when you start looking at seasonal strategies or long range strategies, it starts with consumer insights, consumer data. Where are things moving? What are the trends that you're seeing? Are things kind of status quo? Is there a spike in certain areas of the business? And then as that kind of formulates like where you need to go, getting all those insights, then basically it percolates down through the organization. I'll give you a very specific example here, Matt. Like when we used to do store visits when I was working at Gap, the one thing we started doing, because we did this upside down organizational chart, is instead of just walking through the store, we literally would go in the back stock room and we would spend 2.5, 3 hours with all the regional and district managers. And Liddy would have a feedback session as far as understanding what are the consumers saying? Like, what are the things they're asking for that we're not delivering on? What are we doing well? And we got really hard scores across the kind of the realm of that conversation. And then it kind of grounded us. And then throughout the day, as we were visiting stores, we were putting everything through that feedback. And then we could see it live. You're like, oh, you're right. You're saying we didn't have enough kind of sizing in the store, and look at that. Here's a stack of shirts. We're missing mediums. We're missing this. We're missing that. You were spot on. So I think it's just a great example to make this very tangible. And I think the other thing that's notable about this kind of particular example on the right is the customer is just not at the top of the org. But if you look at the two kind of like rectangles on the side, it envelops the organization. So it's all around it. So I think that is something that's super important as well.
Awesome. I love it, Bob. And I know there's quite a bit of engagement in the chat. So if you think your organization is doing a great job, for those that are on the chat here, feel free to chat that if you think you're doing a great job in this inverted org chart. I personally had an experience prior to working in our industry. I did a lot of business with the company Costco. And one of the things that I loved about Costco is their CEO, Craig, would put on his name tag, for those of you that are Costco shoppers, and he would walk the store. And part of what he loved to do is on a completely unplanned basis, he would show up at a warehouse and he would operate as a customer and give that real-time feedback, really trying to invert that pyramid. So Bob, that's an amazing example. I love it. So one of the things that in a COVID economy, in a dynamic economy that we have today, is customer demands are changing all the time. How do we keep up with the changing buying demands or requirements that our customers have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so many things, right? It's almost overwhelming. And you can almost get into what I oftentimes like to refer to as analysis paralysis, but it's really processing that. So first, I think if you're an organization, before getting into the visual, if you're an organization that is literally selling products in some capacity, whether it's widgets or a specific tangible item like jeans, you're tracking sales, right? And you get that real-time information. Consumers are voting with their wallets. And every kind of retailer or kind of business that's selling things tracks sales performance month over month, year over year. So when you start to see radical shifts upward or downward in trends, basically that's a point of contention to understand, are you under or over servicing the customer, and what basically is driving that, whether it's product shortages. Maybe there's a product that's cheaper in the marketplace competitively that's now kind of coming into your space that's offered a different option for the consumer. Or there could be something that has multi-uses that has more benefits than what your particular products offer. But then I think it's, going back to this chart, really when you look at the habits of super consumer-centric organizations, continual listening. And it really is something that has to happen day in and day out. It's not just a deck. It's interesting. A lot of companies kind of make the mistake, like we're getting customer centric, and they create this huge 80, 120 page deck, take the organization through it. It gets parked 6 months, 12 months later, it's kind of crickets, right? And it's literally that continuity that I think is super important. And it's always getting their feedback. So there's so many different portals. Like I always used to love my day starting the day with coffee and reading all the customer commentary from the website the day before, where you would capture that. And it was brutally honest. Like, some of them, you idiots, like, get your act together. And I'm like, wow, this is like super, super candid. And then we started doing like breakfasts, like in the office, where we would literally talk about the customer commentary, like things we wanted to action on as you work throughout the day. Certain meetings had certain like sound bites or things that would come up real time that you're like, whoa, remember when Jenny from like Iowa said X, Y, and Z? We need to fix this, like when you're in a specific meeting. So that's a real time example. And then, it's interesting. Don't wait for, anticipating and being proactive don't wait for COVID to kind of radically change or come up with innovations in your business. So I'll kind of reinforce this at the end, but I think, you look at all these great services that have kind of grown overnight as the result of like what we've been kind of held captive to over the course of the last year. But then you think like, why weren't these things there before, right? So it's innovating before innovation needs to happen. And then it's being empathetic. Too many times, more often than not, people come at it with a very kind of clinical kind of reaction on how to solve customers' problems. And I had a very kind of prolific person that I work with in store operations when I was at Gap, and he was amazing. And I remember he came in like fire and brimstone, like really energetic and whatnot. And he's like, I love customer problems. I'm like, dude, really? You love customer problems? He's like, yes, because it gives me the option to take a negative and turn it into a positive. And when you make good on something like that, you've now earned that customer's trust. So that's great. Obviously, respect, it goes without saying. You want to respect your customer. You're sharing the knowledge. It doesn't do any good if you're just reading it, but not having the conversations within the organization, and then not even just having the conversations, but applying it at scale. That's super important as well. And then, when you see internal employees that are demonstrating good behavior or customer centricity, reward it. Like say, this is great, like whatever, give them a high five, or just even acknowledge it and say, recognizing the situation happening. And then, always trying to improve the experience. Like it can't be good enough. There's too many options now. Consumers are too smart. They're so well informed. So you've got to be best at your game. So it's super important as well. And then having that accountability, like when you fall short, it needs to be acknowledged, and there needs to be an action point and how you're going to course correct that. It can't just fall something like, oops, we kind of dropped the ball there, and then you turn the page. You really got to have an action if that's something that's of significance to really get that back on course. And then I think the other thing is too, consumer trends are changing daily, and it's radical. In certain industries, they're faster than others, and it really depends. In my business, women's trends were always faster than men's trends. That was just the nature of the beast. But it's really important. I always say that brands need to move at pace with the consumer or slightly ahead. But when you fall behind that pace, that's when you kind of like lose. So that's something that's super important also.
Great insights. My sleep was interrupted this morning when I got an email from our CEO with one of those said customer complaints about somebody saying, hey, this property's been filled. Please take our listing down. But it was actually a great perspective of like, hey, paying attention and having that level of accountability. And one comment you made about we don't need COVID to wait for innovation. I agree. And I'm happy to know that doggy coin was actually created well in advance of COVID. So that was out of necessity, I think. Yeah. You talk about, the habits of organizations, of customer-centric organizations. Another big key that we see happening, and it's key in our business as well as we think about engaging with renters and creating them, taking them through a quiz so they have a short list of communities that meet their needs. Personalization is becoming more and more of a key component in driving buying decisions. How do you see this evolving, and how do you see personalization play a part?
Yeah, that's the alleged P word, right? At the end of the day. So it's interesting because I think so many times, more often than not, everyone basically thinks personalization is digital only, and it really transcends that. But I'll start with digital, and really it's contextually giving the consumer relevant information that basically they, based on their taste and preferences and behaviors, are more than likely wanting to engage with. So again, when you start looking at this, in the digital space, you think of a website. If I'm a male, I want to see male-based content, and that's the stuff that I'm shopping. If there's a mom and she shops for family, she wants to see family-based content. And you could literally run into hundreds or thousands of different permutations. And I think the thing that's kind of critical to understand is there's definitely a point where you can't let personalization just kind of run away, because too much can actually be a bad thing, and you start to lose the brand experience and it doesn't look good. So it's really kind of balancing the art and science between it looking good, it working, and being a good brand experience. And sometimes it's subtlety. It's not even having like a homepage that literally just has like men's content, or it's showing me an item that I already browsed. Like that's kind of table stakes nowadays. This particular example that's here on the screen, I was sitting there one night on my couch, multitasking. I was watching a show, basically streaming something, and I was logging into my Mr. Reporter account. And then and if you guys don't know what it is, it's a luxury men's style website. They do a really great job. They tell great stories. It's a great 360 experience. But as I was logging in, I was sitting there and I looked down, and the masthead at the top of the website literally scrolled and flipped, and then it was Mr. Holobinko. Like I literally had my own site. And I was like, wow, that is like mind blowing. That's super cool. And it's so simple. And I remember screen grabbing it, going into the office and talking about it in one of our innovation meetings. I'm like, guys, this is a great example of something that's low lift, low touch, that really makes people say, aha. And then I think off of that, other great examples are like Crocs, right? When you talk about personalization, that's personalization in the extent that I want to be able to demonstrate my individuality, which I think is something that's super important. And Crocs is having a moment. They're like killing it right now. I mean, they have Bieber. Then Bieber has his own Drew house, like the lavender kind of color with all the different bits and baubles on it. My son has 24. His friend has 36 baubles. They're trying to see who has more and whatever. So it's a great example on how personalization can transcend multiple mediums and not just be the traditional sense that people think of digital. So
I never imagined in my time at Apartment List that we would be talking about Crocs, for gosh sakes, at Spark. But you are right. They are having a moment. It was amazing that one of the financial apps that I follow, Robinhood, had a big piece on Crocs, and their entire focus was around how Crocs has really built some separation between themselves and their competition through specifically personalization. You buy whatever, a $40 or $50 pair of Crocs, and you have $50 to $70 worth of jewels on it to make your Crocs personalized to you. And I think a perfect example of giving consumers that personal experience, which also creates kind of a cultish following and incredible, bottom line profitability and performance, which is amazing. So next question. The pandemic has really changed how we shop, the day-to-day experiences that we have in our respective lives. Last year at Spark, we had the chief product officer of Instacart. I don't think Instacart, when they showed up at Spark in 2020, had any idea what the next 12 months would mean for their organization. In terms of like the pandemic, what do you think it's really changed, and what do you think it's really accelerated?
yeah, that's it. That's a huge one. And I think, many probably have heard the term, the great digital acceleration, right? And before I kind of speak to you specifically what's here on the screen, it's just digital. And when, McKinsey put out a study that said the digital acceleration that's happened as a result of COVID and people sheltering in home and really having few options, but to really move to buying online, it's accelerated by 5 years. That's a half a decade. So that penetration has gotten so massive. So it's really forced companies to kind of play different within the space. But there's been a lot of other things when you look at it. There's the safety factor, there's the convenience factor, because it's like, I want it now, it's at my fingertips, literally, in the most literal sense, between your mobile device. But then there's also convenience and safety. So we talked about Crocs. That's a great example. So you can see the bits and bobbles here. Another slide example that's showing up that's like super cool. But like some of these examples, like walking through outdoor dining in the center, it's not new. Like it's been out there. You have little kind of cafe tables and chairs, and when they're kind of all crammed together, but they needed to be spaced out more. You needed to have your own safe space that was kind of compartmentalized, right? So you basically weren't kind of at risk for getting COVID, for lack of a better description. And it literally started to create these tent cities. And there's a restaurant here local in Montclair that literally calls it Tent City. And it's a marketing thing. When you go on their website, it looks beautiful. It's lit like this with like festival lighting, et cetera. And it's created this experience that's emerged that previously wasn't there. Zoom. Look at Zoom. I used it years before it became the big juggernaut that it is, but it's a way to stay not only connected with business professionals, conduct your job, do what we're actually doing as we speak today, but being able to talk to your loved ones, FaceTime them, whatever video interface you're talking about, it still gives you that face-to-face interaction, which is something that's super important. Curbside delivery. It's something that's not only the big companies like the big three, Amazon, Walmart, and Target, little small mom and pop companies are now offering it. They have tech services where you could literally check out via SMS and then literally drive by, put your flashers on, they'll run out and put it in your trunk. I don't know about you, Matt, but after COVID, I still want that service. So it's something that's super awesome and great because it's now a 5-minute thing versus having to get parking and whatnot. The other example here, which is near and dear to your guys' world, virtuality, right? So virtual tours, having this really great experience in it's URL based versus IRL, and being able to really kind of understand the space in which you're kind of considering all the different nooks and crannies, being able to kind of explore and play and kind of go around that. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart, because before I moved here in Montclair, it was a very competitive marketplace from a housing standpoint. And I kid you not, I literally bought this house sight unseen with using Zillow and having my realtor go in and FaceTime and see all the nooks and crannies that I couldn't see. So it really hits home with me as well.
Yeah, and then I think it's been great to see so many of our customers, really evolve how they go to market. I mean, we're seeing virtual touring really take off. We're seeing self-guided tours, and many of our customers and our partners have been really right on the bleeding edge of driving innovation in this virtual experience. So, final question for you, then I'd love to kind of wrap this morning with some actions that we can take. So final question is, how do you see customer obsession evolving in the future? And what is your prediction as to what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure. I think there's going to be a return in the physical sense. People are craving connectivity, right? We've been locked up for like over a year now, and things are starting to open up, and you can see the optimism in people's eyes. But as we return to some degree of normal, or even whatever the new normal becomes, this particular example, I think starting to get back to the best in class experience in the physical space. So this is Apple, it's no surprise. And it's incredible, right? Because it's a well lit, it's open, it feels good, the product's heroed. But the thing that's so great about an Apple store is not just the environment itself, there's a buzz. And I'm sure all of us, basically, unless you're an Android particular individual, but basically you walk in there at 11 a.m. when it opens at 11:01, there's a buzz, there's an energy. And I've yet to see one associate that comes up that is not like an enthusiastic with almost like a puppy with their tail wagging. They're excited to talk to you. They have an energy and a movement and a bounce in their step. And it doesn't just stop there. It's like the music, the tone, the lighting. And in this particular example, tech, it's a very inorganic kind of situation, right? Just when you think from an experiential, but bringing in the foliage, the plant, the organic elements. So where I'm kind of going with this is I think things are going to be really scaling up. The physical space is going to be taken to the next level where it's really, really best in class. And it is incentive for you to get off your couch versus sit there and shop on your mobile device. Great service. Basically the theatrics of basically what a physical space can be to really make you feel good about crossing that threshold when you go into that location. So
I love it. And I just think about in our industry, I know we all have these experiences where potentially as a renter or in reviewing the performance of kind of our communities, we have communities we've walked into where a leasing agent is potentially sitting at the desk and glances up and is probably thinking, oh God, I wish so desperately nobody walked in here right now. You are really bothering me. And we have others where people, engage in such a dynamic environment in a way that creates this unique, authentic, truly valuable experience. And I think that in and of itself can truly drive kind of that consumer behavior in a really meaningful way. So Bob, to kind of close out this morning, I want to close on 2 things. So first is what's the number one way to make a substantial difference, and then 2, just 2 things that we can all do. So let's start with the first. What is the number one way to make a substantial difference? We are as marketeers, operators, leaders in our respective businesses, such that we can make a difference and apply these learnings to our day-to-day.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is just to commit, right? And once you commit and commit broadly at scale, basically everyone's on board, you're holding hands, you're saying you're going to do it. So I think just by having that particular action point starts to propel you forward to basically being a consumer-centric either individual or organization.
Bob, when we were connecting prior to this, one of the things that I love that you said is, it's not a Tuesday biweekly customer meeting where you talk about this and the customer. It's a daily journey. It's waking up with your cup of coffee, reading your product reviews, top to bottom in the organization, and everyone truly rallying around this idea that the customer has to be at the center of all of our decision making. And I thought that insight was incredibly valuable. So Bob, close us out this morning. What are the two things that everybody that is either on today or will be getting a recording of these sessions can take away to grow closer to their customers and drive change in their organization?
Yeah, so I'll leave you with these two. And look, they're not that profound and they're super easy and everybody has the tools to do it. So there's zero investment. And the first is talk to your consumer. It's that simple. And if you aren't in the front line and you can't talk to them directly, talk to those who do talk to them. So the example that I gave about, changing the organizational store visits and starting with a consumer insight through the field who would basically give you all these kind of like nuggets of data on what the consumers are telling them. It was very insightful and it was so beneficial. I just can't underscore it enough. And then I think the other thing is really what you said, injecting customer centricity into your daily routine, whether it's at breakfast, whether you want to do lunch at noon, at the evening, from a wrap up standpoint, the more it becomes habitual. They say it takes 21 days to form a habit. So everyone here that's on the call opposite me, et cetera, let's do this for the next 21 days. And after that, you'll see the difference, right? And the organization will start coming around. There'll be energy around it, and you should start to see a lift and generally as a result.
I love it, Bob. I think an action that I would seek everyone's commitment, and you can either virtually or actually raise your hand. I would like our team at Apartment List commit to, spending 5 minutes a day, just 5, every single day, Monday through Friday, in reviewing our customer feedback. We get it from renters and we get it from our clients. And we have the medium to review that and actually, if not drive immediate change, feel what our customers are feeling. So the commitment I would ask from everyone out here in our Spark community is commit to spending the next 21 days between now and basically the end of the month to carving out 5 minutes a day, only 5, to understand what are your customers really saying about their experience with your business and how you can drive it to make your organizations more customer-centric. Bob, we're so thrilled that you joined us this morning to kick off Spark. Your insight is really, really energizing for us and something that we can take away. We'll look forward to following your continued success, and thanks for supporting us this morning.
Thank you, Matt. It was great.